Many people can find the island of Ireland on a map. But why is it two different countries? Most of the island is the Republic of Ireland. The northeast part is Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom. This separation is called the partition of Ireland. It is not very old. It happened just over 100 years ago. This division created many problems and led to a very sad day in modern Irish history. This tragic event is known as Bloody Sunday. To understand why Ireland was divided and why the violence of Bloody Sunday happened, we must look at the past. The reasons for this conflict are not new. They are very old and started hundreds of years ago. This story explains that long and difficult history. 2. Old Ireland. To understand Ireland today, we must look at its old history. This story started many hundreds of years ago, long before the English first arrived. It is a story of different peoples, new ideas, and constant fighting. A very long time ago, a group of people called the Celts came to Ireland from mainland Europe. They brought their language and their way of life with them. Over time, this created what we call Gaelic culture. This culture was strong and spread across the whole island. It included its own special music, stories, and art. Gaelic Ireland was not a single united country. Instead, the island was a patchwork of many small kingdoms. Each kingdom was ruled by a local king or a chieftain. These chieftains and their clans often fought each other for more land and power. Because of this fighting, Ireland was always divided. It stayed independent and was never part of the large Roman Empire which ruled the island of Britain next to it. Around the 5th century, a very important change happened. The Christian religion came to Ireland. A missionary named Saint Patrick is the most famous person who helped bring this new faith. With Christianity, reading and writing also came to the island. Monks built special places called monasteries. In these monasteries, they studied and wrote many important books. They created beautiful art in these books and helped save knowledge from older times. Later, new people came in ships from the sea. These were the Vikings, who started to attack around the year 795. At first, they only came to raid and steal, but later they stayed and built settlements. The Vikings built the first real towns in Ireland. Cities like Dublin, Cork, and Limerick all started as Viking trading ports. They changed Ireland's economy, but never controlled the entire country. An Irish king named Brian Boru defeated the Vikings in a major battle. After this, the Vikings' power became much weaker. However, the island was still a collection of separate, small kingdoms. This division made it weak and open to a new invasion. 3. The English arrive. In the 12th century, Ireland was not one united country. It had many small kingdoms, and the Irish kings often fought each other. This weakness created an opportunity for a new group to arrive. In the year 1169, an Irish king asked for military help from some powerful soldiers in England. These soldiers were called Anglo-Norman knights. The knights arrived in Ireland and were very successful in battle. They had better weapons and armor. They helped the Irish king who invited them, but they also started to take land for themselves. This was the beginning of the English presence on the island. The King of England at the time was Henry II. He heard about the success of his knights and became worried. He did not want them to become too powerful and create their own independent kingdom. So, in 1171, King Henry traveled to Ireland with a very large army. He wanted to show everyone that he was in charge. He took control of the land his knights had captured and made part of Ireland an English territory. He named his son the first English Lord of Ireland. For the first time, an English king claimed to rule part of the country. However, English control was not complete. The new Anglo-Norman lords lived in Ireland, far from the king in England. Over the next few hundred years, these families began to change. They started to adopt the local culture. They learned to speak the Irish language, married into Irish families, and followed Irish customs. People said they were more Irish than the Irish themselves. Because of this, the English king's power in Ireland became weak. It was only really strong in a small area of land around Dublin. Then, in the 16th century, a new and powerful family began to rule England, the Tudors. The Tudor kings and queens wanted to have full control over Ireland. King Henry VIII was a famous Tudor king. He also tried to change Ireland's religion from Catholic to Protestant. The Irish people resisted this. In 1541, Henry gave himself the new title King of Ireland. This showed that England's plans had changed. They no longer wanted just a small part of Ireland. They wanted to conquer the entire island. 4. A new religion. In the 16th century, the English king, Henry VIII, created a new religion in England. It was called the Protestant religion. He wanted Ireland to change from Catholic to Protestant, but most Irish people were strong Catholics. They did not want to follow the new English religion. This disagreement was the start of a new, big problem between England and Ireland. The English rulers became determined to control Ireland completely. After a war at the start of the 17th century, the English government had a new idea. It was called the Plantation of Ulster. This happened in the northern part of Ireland. The government took huge areas of land away from the native Irish Catholic families. They then gave this land to thousands of new settlers from England and Scotland. These new people were Protestants. This plan put a large number of people who were loyal to Britain in one part of Ireland. The Plantation of Ulster changed everything. It created deep anger between the native Catholics and the new Protestant settlers. The Catholics lost their homes and their land. The Protestants had the best land and the support of the English government. These two groups lived side by side, but they did not trust each other. This division between Catholic and Protestant would become a very serious problem for hundreds of years. The anger finally exploded. In 1641, the Irish Catholics rebelled against the new settlers and the English government. This started a terrible war. A few years later, an English leader named Oliver Cromwell came to Ireland with his army. Cromwell's conquest was very violent and cruel. His soldiers killed thousands of people and destroyed towns. After the war, Cromwell's government took even more land from the Catholics. By the 1650s, Catholics owned only a small part of the land in their own country. Later, a Protestant king won a famous battle in 1690. After this victory, the government in Ireland created very harsh laws against Catholics. These were called the penal laws. The laws said Catholics could not buy land, vote, or get a good education. The goal was to keep Catholics poor and without any power. A small group of rich Protestants now controlled almost all of Ireland. 2. Ireland's. In 1801, the British government passed the Act of Union. This law joined Ireland with Great Britain. Ireland's own parliament in Dublin was closed. Now all big decisions for Ireland were made in London. Many Irish people were not happy with this. Life was very hard for most people in Ireland. In the 1840s, a terrible thing happened. A disease destroyed the potato crop for many years. Potatoes were the main food for poor families. This time was called the Great Famine. About 1 million people died of hunger. Another 1 million people left Ireland to find a new life in other countries. People felt the British government did not do enough to help them. This made the wish for Irish independence much stronger. For the rest of the century, many Irish politicians fought for Home Rule. Home Rule meant Ireland could have its own government again to manage its own problems, but it would still be part of the British world. Some people did not want to wait. In 1916, during the First World War, a small group of Irish rebels started the Easter Rising in Dublin. They said Ireland was a republic, free from Britain. The British Army stopped the rebellion in less than a week. They arrested the rebels and killed the leaders. This made many Irish people very angry. More people started to support the idea of a fully independent Ireland. This led to the Irish War of Independence from 1919 to 1921. The Irish Republican Army, or IRA, fought against the British. The war ended with the Anglo-Irish Treaty in 1921. But this treaty came with a big change. It divided, or partitioned, the island. 26 counties became the Irish Free State, a new country with its own government. But 6 counties in the northeast became Northern Ireland. This part of the island stayed in the United Kingdom. Most people in Northern Ireland were Protestants and wanted to be British. But many Catholics now lived there too. They felt they were left behind and were not part of the new Irish state. This created a new, deep problem for the island of Ireland. 6. The Troubles start. After the partition of Ireland, Northern Ireland had its own government. This government was controlled by one party, the Unionists. Unionists were mostly Protestants who wanted Northern Ireland to stay part of the United Kingdom. For the large Catholic minority, life was very difficult. There was systemic discrimination. This means the system was designed to be unfair to Catholics. They were often denied good jobs, access to education, and public housing. Voting rules were also a problem. To vote in local elections, you had to own property. This rule stopped many poorer Catholics from voting. In the late 1960s, Catholics in Northern Ireland were inspired by civil rights movements around the world. They decided to fight for equality. They started a civil rights movement, and their protests were peaceful. They organized marches to ask for fair treatment. They wanted simple things: one person, one vote, fair access to jobs and houses, and an end to discrimination. However, their peaceful marches were often met with violence. Unionist groups, and sometimes even the police, attacked the protesters. The government of Northern Ireland then banned all civil rights marches. But this did not stop the anger. The situation grew worse and more violent. This was the start of a 30-year conflict known as the Troubles. The conflict exploded. People on both sides formed armed groups called paramilitaries. The Provisional Irish Republican Army, IRA, used violence to try and force Britain out of Ireland. Loyalist groups, like the Ulster Volunteer Force, fought to keep Northern Ireland British. Car bombings, shootings, and kidnappings became common. Fear was everywhere. In the summer of 1969, the violence was so bad that the British government sent the army to Northern Ireland. At first, some Catholics welcomed the soldiers. They hoped the army would protect them. But the army could not stop the fighting. In 1971, the government introduced a new policy called internment. This allowed the army to arrest and hold people without a trial. They arrested hundreds of people, almost all of them Catholics. This policy made Catholics feel that the army was their enemy. The Troubles became much, much worse. 7. A very bad day. In Northern Ireland, the situation was very bad. Catholic people continued to protest for their rights. They were very angry about a policy called internment. This policy allowed the army to arrest and hold people in prison without a trial. Civil rights leaders decided to organize a big march to protest against this unfair policy. The march was planned for the city of Derry. The date was Sunday, January 30th, 1972. Thousands of people wanted to join to show that internment was wrong. The British government knew about the planned march. They decided to send a special group of soldiers to Derry. This group was the Parachute Regiment. These soldiers had a reputation for being very tough. They were sent to police the protest and keep order. The government had also said that all marches were banned, But the people decided to march anyway. On the day of the protest, many people came to the streets of Derry. There were about 10,000 marchers. It was a very large and hopeful crowd. They started to walk peacefully through the city's Catholic area, called the Bogside. But the army was waiting for them. The soldiers had built a barricade. A barricade is like a wall across a road to stop people. The soldiers wanted to stop the marchers from reaching the city center. The leaders of the march saw the army barricade. They did not want any violence or trouble. They told the large crowd to turn around and take a different route to a meeting place. Most of the thousands of people listened. They started to walk away from the soldiers and the barricade. However, a small group of young men did not leave. They were very angry about the soldiers blocking their way. They started to throw stones at the soldiers who were at the barricade. The soldiers responded quickly. They used rubber bullets, tear gas, and a water cannon to push the young men back. This made people panic. The situation became very confused and noisy. Then, at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, the army gave a new, dangerous order. The parachute regiment was told to move in and start making arrests. The soldiers got into their heavy armored vehicles. They drove very fast into the crowds of people. The peaceful marchers were very frightened and started to run away. The soldiers jumped out and started hitting people with their batons and arresting them. Just 5 minutes later, a terrible thing happened. The soldiers started to shoot. They fired their real guns into the crowd of unarmed people. For about 30 minutes, the sound of gunfire filled the air. The soldiers fired over 100 bullets. They were shooting at men, women, and young people who were running for their lives. The people had no weapons to defend themselves. When the shooting finally stopped, the street was a scene of horror and disbelief. 13 people were dead. Another 14 people were wounded by the bullets. Many of the dead were very young. 6 of them were only 17 years old. The peaceful protest for civil rights had ended in a massacre. January 30th, 1972 became known as Bloody Sunday, a very bad day in Irish history. It changed everything and made the long conflict in Northern Ireland much, much worse. 8. The Long Road to Peace. After the terrible events of Bloody Sunday, the British government quickly started an investigation. But it was not a fair one. The first official report, called the Widgery Tribunal, was finished in only 3 months. This report said the soldiers did nothing wrong. It put the blame on the marchers for creating a dangerous situation. This was a cover-up. The government was hiding the truth about what really happened in Derry. This false report made people across Ireland very angry. For many Catholics in Northern Ireland, it felt like they could never get justice. The Troubles became much worse after Bloody Sunday. More young people joined groups like the IRA to fight against the British Army. The violence continued for many more years. Over the next decades, thousands more people died in the conflict. The island of Ireland remained a very sad and divided place. But after almost 30 years of fighting, people on both sides were tired of the violence. They started to talk about peace. In 1998, leaders from the nationalist and unionist communities made a very important deal. It is called the Good Friday Agreement. This agreement created a new kind of government for Northern Ireland. In this government, unionists and nationalists had to share power. They had to learn to work together to make decisions. This was the start of a new, more peaceful time. Part of the Good Friday Agreement was a promise to find the real truth about Bloody Sunday. A new, much bigger investigation started. This was the Saville Inquiry. It took 12 long years and cost a lot of money. It listened to hundreds of witnesses and looked at all the information again. In the end, this new report told a very different story from the first one. It said the people who were killed and hurt were innocent. They were not carrying weapons and were not a threat to the soldiers. The report also said that the soldiers were wrong to shoot, and that some of them lied to hide what they did. Finally, in 2010, the truth was officially recognized. The British Prime Minister, David Cameron, made a formal apology in public. He said that what the soldiers did was unjustified and unjustifiable. For the families of the victims, this apology was very important. It came after almost 40 years of waiting for the truth. Today, Northern Ireland is much more peaceful, but the pain from the past is still there for many people. Healing the deep wounds of history takes a very long time. Do you think a formal apology from a government is an important step for peace?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.